Hello and welcome. I'm Liam Martin, introducing a special recording, The Arcane Observer, with Douglas Dietrich. In an impromptu exchange, this riveting conversation between Mr. Dietrich and Jen covers many areas, but primarily focusing on Michael Aquino, history and Satanism. We hope you enjoy this call-in, recording and resulting discussion.
Hello.
Hi, now we can hear you. This is Jennifer Hawkins.
Sorry.
This was a monumental struggle, but it's well worth it. George Knight, this is our gentleman from England. Oh, George, don't go mute, for God's sakes. I need you to introduce yourself.
Yes.
And this is the lovely lady, Jennifer Hawkins. Jennifer Hawkins, of course, this is her first time on with us, and we'll do our best to make it as pleasant as possible. Brendan Zoget seems to have dropped off. I have no idea what was going on with that. I left him a message in the... so we'll see what happens. But either way, this is all working out organically. So introduce yourself for a few moments here, George, and then we'll find out a little bit more about Jennifer.
All right. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm very sorry about that.
No worries.
Yes, I think that I had my microphone muted, but it was unmuted on the Skype. So it appeared that I was unmuted, but my microphone was actually muted. Anyway, I'm very excited to be talking with you a little bit.
Yeah, we're excited too, believe me. Go on.
Well, I'm sorry there was a bit of a problem there, but I think it was because I had muted my microphone and that caused a disruption initially just because of that, and then made you think that there was some kind of problem with it when actually on my end I had muted it or something to the effect. I don't know.
No, I knew it was something
like
that. Yeah, I knew it was something like that. That's common. It's common. Don't worry about it.
I'm sorry
go on.
about
Yeah, no worries. Go on, Jennifer.
No, I actually came across, I've heard several of your lectures that you have had on YouTube, and it was really incredible. Mostly I was following the Michael Aquino and the conversations about Satanism in the military, and I was really fascinated about that, and I was kind of following that line of thought, and then came across that you actually had a YouTube channel literally just a few days ago. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he literally is doing live streams and talking, openly to the public on YouTube.
Yeah. Throughout the night, no less. Twice a week, yeah.
Yes. And I thought it was really incredible. And then of course I subscribed and then put up notifications, and notification did pop up. But I hadn't found you for the longest time now at all.
Oh my God.
But
well,
then,
that's because, we're shadow banned and it's very difficult to find us on searches. Just so I can emphasize what you're saying so that people can help us, I want people to understand that YouTube dissemination of on their search engine, they go by a popularity aggregate, which is completely self-defeating. That means the more popular you are, the more you're going to appear on searches. So it pretty much eliminates anybody except those who are in the millions of hits. So the only way that we can appear on searches is to get as many people to upvote us as possible. So this is why I tell people that you've got to fight as dirty as possible. It's a dirty situation. So it's guerrilla warfare is the only response. You've got to get on every IP address you've got, which is your PC, your laptop, your cell phone, your tablet, everything you've got, and just put an upvote, because it's the only way that we're going to get noticed on searches. So like Jennifer says, we're not appearing on searches because there's not enough upvotes. So the more popular you are, the more you appear on searches. It's completely stupid. So that's why I ask for the upvotes, not because it's some kind of psychological boost, though it's always great to see that, but basically to keep us on the searches. So, but I'm glad that, after the months it probably was in which you didn't see any notifications, that you finally caught up with us and then got into a live stream, no less. I mean, we're honored to have you, and tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, certainly I'm fascinated by your interest in the subjects that I address, and certainly I'm curious as to what alerted you to Michael Aquino. And you're welcome to start with that. But certainly we'd all like to know a little bit more about whatever you're willing to share about yourself as well. So please, by all means, the stage is yours.
Oh, okay. That's very generous. No, I just Michael Aquino I've been following for years now, years and years, for a while. Just the idea that it was Satanism in general, interested in how the military was relating with this and trying to understand what they were doing. And then I came across that you were a librarian.
Yes.
And I thought that was incredible. And the close connection you had at that time with all of this and the information that you had was almost like it was priceless, like to especially now to even be, have access to talk with you about it. But no, yes. Anyway, I've been following this for a while, and I do have
well, I mean, the
I'm
question.
associated.
Go on. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're associated. Go on.
I'm associated with a radio station, KUAP.
Did you send me any emails? Did you send me?
I did.
Okay. Thank God. Thank God you followed up. Oh God, yeah, because you sent me at least one email, maybe two.
Just one.
Okay, you sent me just one. Okay, and I didn't even get a chance. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if you've been following my schedule recently, but you might have had a hint about how busy I was this month.
I imagine.
Yeah, and it can get that way. It can get that way any month. There's different things going on, but I'm so glad you followed up because I was going to respond to that email, and I keep reminding myself to do that. But I get so caught up in so many different things. So thank God you. So you have your own little thing going, and you were inviting me to an interview on that, right?
Yeah, I just have a small YouTube channel, very small little YouTube channel, but that I just started a couple of years ago, and I've posted some videos up. But I'm associated.
I'd be happy to do an interview with you. I'd be happy to do an interview with you.
That would be amazing. And I would have to, because this was completely impromptu. Yeah. I saw you were live, and I was like, I'm going to pop in there because I'm, kind of tying things up for the night and everything. But
well, you're on my favorites list now, and
thank you so much. That's very thoughtful of you.
So by your icon in the chat, forgive me. The icon looks as if you might be Asian or half Asian, or is that just the way you kind of look? The icon looks maybe.
I don't know. I think I'm just a half breed of several things.
Okay.
But most likely, But no, I'm really glad to be on here to be able to visit with you, and the knowledge that you have right now. Here you are talking, about World War II and about Hitler, which is incredible. I don't know. I would like to do an interview with you sometime about this, but I'm actually I'm listening right now. And I do, the fact that you are even lacing into the idea that World War II is about much more than what it appears to be on the surface to most people revisiting it from a historical perspective, that there was something going on there that had more significance than that. It's completely, it's neglected by the general populace in these conversations. And so I think it would be extremely helpful, I think, to try to bring some light onto this, even though I do know, and there's, that obviously it is sort of something that people maybe they're a little uncomfortable at first, but with a gentle introduction to all the ideas, they may understand that there was a bigger perspective of what was the aim was during World War I and World War II. And I think that you have clearly honed in on that there's of what that was exactly, what the motive was for that. Yes.
No, just to put this in some context, the way that I would respond to that would be that a great deal of the public is actually obsessed with the idea that World War II was a spiritual battle, but what they are buying into is very much the opposite of the truth, which is their perception that the Axis powers were somehow diabolic, particularly the Germans. So the films that are constantly produced very much continually indoctrinate them into this concept of the Germans being somehow infernal or diabolically motivated at the higher command levels at the very least. and it is something that this is how the Allied public, and by that I mean the population that watches Hollywood movies or any other kinds of films that are produced about World War II in some general entertainment sense, whether they're produced in Hollywood or in England or in Russia in particular. But these are the big three Allied powers that are the most desperate to maintain this myth of themselves as quote-unquote the good guys in World War II. And as a result, they are obsessed with the quote-unquote evil of Nazism. And they are obsessed with trying to somehow rationalize themselves as being the good guys based on the evil of the enemy. As a matter of fact, it's to the point where there's not even much dwelling on the Allied side of the Allies doing anything particularly quote-unquote good. You don't really see oftentimes Allies presenting themselves as doing something particularly good or constructive or somehow charitable. Rather, they keep emphasizing about how evil the enemy is. It's as if their argument is that you'd better be glad we quote-unquote won, because look at the alternative. Why, these guys were really bad. But then, of course, because of the obsession with seeking alternative truth, quote-unquote, or alternative facts. By the way, these are oxymorons. They make absolutely no sense. People seeking alternative information, which would be legitimate, alternative information, they're left with this sewer that is the internet, and what they run across then convinces them that, quote-unquote, the Nazis won, quote-unquote, and are somehow running the world right now. And if you go into the internet, this is a very common theme, and one of the deepest regrets I have in my life as a librarian. I say this almost kind of humorously. There's a sense of, how would I say it, irony here. It's not that I regret it to the point where maybe, I stay up at night thinking I should never have done it, but it is definitely... There's times when I think something similar or along those lines. I was one of the people who hemorrhaged an enormous amount of information when I was working with the Department of Defense. One of the elements of information that I released information on before I came out under my own name as a public informant was about Operation Paperclip. And Operation Paperclip was simply a technical exchange. There's nothing political about Operation Paperclip. You're talking about engineers, some scientists. Operation Paperclip was bringing over technical specialists who were basically keeping America in an advantage over the Soviet Union. These were German people who may or may not have been affiliated with the exploitation of slave labor or working in some manner with the labor camps or death camps, but they really were not interested in politically influencing America. But Operation Paperclip, if you were to go online and look in the alternative information site sources or even just regular conventional information site sources, you're going to get the impression that Operation Paperclip was where the Third Reich transferred its whole fucking government and now runs the United States. I mean, this is literally what people will essentially be telling you. And it's just crap. It's just insane. And it makes absolutely no sense. Anyone with any modicum of logic would say, gee, they brought all the Nazis over and in this governmental exchange where we got their government and they're now running America. I mean, it just makes so much sense because, of course, of the Jewish influence in Hollywood and the Jewish influence in finance. And obviously, the fact that we're sending a carrier task force to support Israel while it's going to prepare for a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. I mean, all this proves the Nazis must be running the show with so much response to Jewish needs and the power that Jews hold in American culture, even though they're only 2% of the American population demographically. This is something which I'm not even saying from some, shall I say, stance of that it needs to be changed. I'm just talking about the reality of the situation, and that obviously if the Nazis were running the show, that reality wouldn't be the reality that we see.
Right.
But nobody thinks logically. So that being said, please, any other, go on with any other. Not that I mean to hold the interview here, mind you. We can always hold this on your YouTube channel, but let's have a conversation while we're here. I mean, feel free to also state whatever else comes up to your mind.
Well, what you were saying, it made me think. I always wondered. Well, actually, I got into even thinking about the very first thing I remember, as far as thinking that something, when I was trying to do a great deal of searching at all, it began with World War II. It began with Hitler. It began with, trying to pick apart what was going on there, because the way it's presented in the education system. And I thought, this is probably the most important thing where things began to really change, or at least it became obvious that something was happening. Something dramatically happened after World War II. It seemed that way to me. So when I was looking into it, and only recently I began to wonder, even if in the operation, in Paperclip, was it possible that some, German American citizens who had came over to the United States at some point and were working for the military, had they possibly gone into the Reich when they, at that time in World War II, and been working within the government in Germany there, in Germania, and then was Project Paperclip, was it Operation Paperclip, was it actually bringing home chickens to roost in a way? Were some of those scientists, were they initially American implants, even German American implants from Germany? I mean, actually German. But were they American citizens working for the German military and had infiltrated into Germany, went right back, and then were they secretly the whole time working on that, working from the USA, some of them, and then bringing some of the information back? I always wondered about that. Another thing I always wondered about was, the war itself, of course, it was strange how it is neglected, that what proportion of the population of that region was completely annihilated, and then how many people went missing during that war. Millions that are unaccounted for, that were completely missing.
Thank you.
Which of course could be expected during wartime.
Not at those numbers, but go on.
Not at those numbers. Thank you. I thought that those numbers were extremely, you're talking millions of people that are completely unaccounted for.
And so, just to put this into perspective for our listeners, I don't know if Jennifer Hawkins is referencing this specifically, but the first thing that would come to my mind, with what she's discussing, would be the fact that if you were to analyze or tabulate the population of Germanic peoples in Central Europe prior to World War II, basically we're talking about the equivalent of well nigh almost 200 million Germans, but we're talking about all over Eastern Europe. We're talking, for instance, this would include the Volga Germans in the Ukraine that were deported by Joseph Stalin during the war. They were considered an untrustworthy population, and Joseph Stalin was deporting into deeper areas of Siberia or Central Asia entire populations throughout the Second World War, and just denuding various elements of European Russia of many minorities that had been there for hundreds of years. And this, of course, would account for many millions missing. But then you go further into Central Europe, which is that shatter belt region, is what geographers used to use these terms for geopolitics. They'd call these regions between like Germany and Russia, where you have many smaller states, they'd call that a shatter belt region. There's shatter belt regions in other parts of the world, like Indochina, for instance, is considered such. But the Germans that were scattered in those areas altogether, when you count them and the Volga Germans, you're talking about 180 million German people. Now, within the relatively short period after World War II, Say, for instance, at the time of the Balkan War, meaning when I was serving as a mercenary in the Balkans, 1990s. By that time, if you added the populations of East and West Germany, which were then united at that point, along with Austria together, you have 100 million Germans. Now, that's a lot. Comparatively speaking, that's a lot of people, which is an amazing number considering the war and how many died. But from 180 million Germans before World War II to 100 million Germans by 1990, that means that shortly around 1945 through 1950, you have 80 million people disappear. 80 million people disappear. No one accounts for that. They speak of all kinds of numbers, like the American academics, which are quite leftist, quite liberal, quite progressive. And I myself point out that I'm a liberal progressive, but it's mostly to kind of counterbalance or just kind of balance out the insanity of the radicalized right at this point in political history, this point in social history. The radicalized right dominates the alternative media, and they are extraordinarily cleaving. They cleave very precisely to the Russian line, the Russian party line. So you'll hear them regurgitate Russian propaganda. I've often said that alternative media is Russian propaganda translated into English, and that's pretty much what the majority of it is. But when it comes to the situation of the disappearing German population, basically cut in half, you'll hear the Russians over and over again. Originally, it was through liberal progressive academia, many of the academics basically being ideological Marxists or communists in America for generations. They would constantly tell you that, the Soviets won World War II, and it's the Soviet population that made the greatest sacrifices in World War II. By the way, this is a lie on the face of it, because obviously the greatest loss of population was in China. Whether it was under the nationalist or communist government, far more people died in China than died in Soviet Russia or any of the Soviet republics put together into the greater Soviet Union. So the academics are already lying on that count. But then to go beyond that, just because the Soviets lost such an enormous amount of their population, literally around 127 million people, as a matter of fact, there were far less survivors. Maybe about 124 million survived. By the end of World War II, all of the Soviet republics combined basically had a population equal to that of Japan's, which nobody ever mentions or even knows about because nobody's done any research into the demographics. Nobody cares. So the Soviet population by that time was already denuded. It was completely incapable of doing anything really aggressive on the world scene. But when it came to the reality, your average survivor of World War II had family later on in general, where everyone would basically be able to say that they had some relation who had died in World War II. It became a national trauma, a shared crisis, a shared identity, and it became literally what was called the Soviet cult of the dead. Basically, the Soviets made this their religion. They didn't have a religion per se, so this became their religion, was the national sacrifice of World War II. But just because half your population gets wiped out doesn't mean you won the war. If anything, it shows you've lost. In terms of the Soviets and what happened with them, they had no real decisive impact on the war, yet the West is convinced they did. This is why the West is so bought into the myth that the Soviet military was invincible and therefore the Russian military was invincible, and why they kept saying, we'll just let the Soviets have the Ukraine. The original attitude the Americans had was the Ukrainians can't stop the Russians are unstoppable, and everybody just wrote off the Ukraine. And they wrote it off when the Russians invaded Crimea. They wrote it off when the Russians invaded again the year before last. It was, this is the madness of the Americans. And it's despite the fact that the Russians are demonstrably incapable of waging war at all. The Americans, if you go on YouTube and you just see videos about World War II, just casually scroll down and look at the comment sections, and everybody is still orgasmic over the Russians in World War II, saying, oh yeah, and if the Russians invaded Japan, they would have taken at least half of it, if not all of it. You know, I mean, I could go on about this for hours, but you get my point. The real point that we were getting back to, that you alluded to at first, was with all this disappearance of populations, we get hit over the head with the losses of the Russians again and again, the Soviets again and again, even though it has no impact on real history. It's a human tragedy, but it has no strategic impact. Nobody talks about the fact that half the German population disappeared. Now, one of the things that I found really irritating was when I was being interviewed by a German in Germany. He was in Germany. I was not. We were talking via Skype, just like you and I right now. But he was a German guy sitting in Germany. And, of course, he had to give me the warning. Don't say anything about, less Jews died in the Holocaust, because, that's illegal over there. If you say something like that, they could put him in jail. And I said, if anything, I've always told people that far more people died in the Holocaust than the Jews themselves admit. But when I was speaking to him about this missing German population, then I found it irritating. He says, so are you saying they all went to Unterland? Now, he's, in all fairness, was just trying to be a good interviewer and trying to get to certain points right away. But, of course, it's just so offensive. No, of course, I'm not saying that all these people evacuated to Unterland. But obviously, millions did. So when you take a look at this many Germans disappearing, nobody dares to talk about it. Obviously, a great deal of them were exterminated. In terms of the Germans that were not exterminated, did they just have, say, for instance, some kind of rapture where they just teleported into heaven? No, there was a mass migration into Unterland, and it did involve an exodus of literally millions of people. Now, we're speaking of maybe a few million. And at the most, probably realistically, about 3 to 4 million at a maximum. That would be over a period of many decades. But obviously, this was something that was going on at the time that when the Iron Curtain went up and Central Europe was effectively shut off from the rest of the world. Not even the Soviets could hide a genocide that massive. So we're talking about the majority of the exodus that took place had to take place from 1945 through about the 1950s, 60s at the latest, where there might have been a trickle after that. But the majority of it took place really in the decade after World War II. But mostly as close to World War II as you can get, basically from 1945 till about the Japanese-American Peace Treaty of 1952 is when the majority of the exodus had to take place. So the majority of the migration did take place through Antarctica. The majority of the Germans that relocated to Unterland relocated during that time. But then, of course, there were many millions who died. Now, there was a man, and this is where we have to be we have to show discernment. We have to be very careful about the sources that we select. But one person who is one of these few gray sources, I would say that the majority of sources out there are pretty black and white. You have people who become Holocaust deniers, and I have to dismiss most of what they're saying, just on the basis of the fact that they're lost in trying to prove something that is of no interest to me. They're lost in basically trying to redeem the German culture by saying this Holocaust was not committed, but oftentimes they're Judeophobic. I use that term, of course. If you've heard me in the past, you understand I disambiguate the term Judeophobic from anti-Semitic, because For those who are unfamiliar with the ethnography, Arabs are Semitic. And so because Arabs are Semitic and they're in the great majority, to use the term anti-Semitic really means you're anti-Arabic. And why the Arabic people never jump on this is beyond me. It's probably because they don't have enough media control. But the Jewish people were biblically Semitic. Of course, I've pointed out the differing ethnicity of many Jews in Israel today. Many are out and out Russian, and many are out and out Turkic descent, and etc., etc. Very few are Semitic. They would be mostly Sephardim Jews, as opposed to Ashkenazi. But in terms of the reality of demographics and all that, I use the term Judeophobe. But many of these Holocaust deniers are just out and out Judeophobic. They're just very rabidly anti-Jewish. I'm not going to use the term anti-Semitic for reasons I've just articulated. So you want to evade that. But when it comes to one source that I found bears at least looking into to a degree, I don't think he has much of an output, was Jonathan Sachs. And Jonathan Sachs, his surname is spelled S-A-C-H-S. Jonathan Sachs wrote a book titled An Eye for an Eye. And in the book An Eye for an Eye, he was pointing out that, as I explained at great length in many past episodes, and just to summarize it as quickly as possible right now, the Jewish Pale of Settlement throughout Eastern Europe, from the Baltic to the Black Sea, which went all the way into Moscow because of their need in the capital of the nobles for accountants, dentists, attorneys, people providing services that the peasants couldn't provide. The Russians had an extraordinarily sharply demarcated society. And you had the nobles, and you had the peasants who were called serfs, and you had basically no middle class. And so the closest thing they had to a middle class was basically an enormous Jewish population. So the Jewish population was, of course, educated, and they took care of all these services that the nobles were not going to handle, and the peasants, the serfs, could not. And so they were effectively, aside from the aristocracy, the only literate class or caste, effectively a caste, in Tsarist Russia. When the Bolsheviks took over and the nobility, the aristocracy, was exterminated or fled, emigrated, if not exterminated, then the only people who could read and write were the Jews. And because your average peasant couldn't even sign their own name, they'd have to sign either with an X or a bloody thumbprint, then they had to turn towards the Jews for administration. So because of this, when the Greater Soviet Union was established, it was effectively a Jewish commissarocracy with machine guns. And this Jewish middle class was suddenly given all power over life and death, and they exploited it beyond mercilessly. The amount of people who died in the gulags, in the pogroms, in the mass exterminations under these Jewish Bolsheviks as commissars, as a class, as a caste yet again, the commissarocracy, was astronomical. It's far more people than died during World War II. And so even though the Russians lost 127 million in World War II, they lost pretty much double that number to this Jewish commissarocracy before the war even started. This is why after World War II was over, their population was basically equal to that of Japan's. And that was with all of the absorbed republics of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all the integral Soviet republics. This is why they had to have Eastern Europe, because without that, they didn't have manpower to do anything. So with when it came to what the Jewish commissarocracy did at its worst was in the Ukraine. And that's where, of course, as I brought up before, the amount of farmers in the world, unless you're involved with agribusiness, where you've got an industry that is using up massive amounts of acreage with a lot of imported labor to pick the harvest and a lot of robots to tend to the harvest otherwise, just or machines where people are using various vehicles, grain threshers and the like. The majority of farmers in the world are subsistence farmers, because if anyone knows anything about farming, it's impossible to grow enough food other than to feed yourself. It takes so much land to just feed yourself that farming beyond feeding yourself is almost impossible without industry or an agricultural cooperative. So when it comes to Ukraine, it's one of the few places in the world blessed with black soil. And black soil enables you to produce more than you need to feed yourself. It enables you to produce a surplus. And 25% of the world's black soil is in Ukraine. So it's the breadbasket of the world. And that's one reason why Putin wants to conquer it. If he can conquer Ukraine with another 25% of the world's black soil in Russia itself, he automatically controls almost half the world's food supply. So when it comes to the Ukraine under the Soviets, basically the Jewish commissarocracy said, well, to feed the Russians, we'll just take everything out of the Ukraine. And they denuded the Ukraine, and the Ukrainians themselves were left starving. So this was called the Holodomor. And during the Holodomor in Ukraine, 15 million Ukrainians died. That's more than the Holocaust, even if you count all of those Jews that are not born of the matrilineal, those Jews that are born of the patrilineal side of the family that the Jews don't count as Jews. If it were, by the way, George Knight says, thank you so much for all this, Douglas. Thank you for having me, and wonderful to meet you, Jennifer. I'll look forward to joining you all next time. Thank you, George. He has to go to work.
But, have good work.
Yeah. So when it comes to Ukraine, this is why Putin says Ukraine is Nazi and he has to denazify it, was because during World War II, the Ukrainians sided with the Third Reich. And this is because of what the Jews had done to them. The Jews had done so much damage, killed so many of their countrymen, that obviously they wanted to get back at them. That's why the largest massacre of Jews in World War II took place in the Ukraine, at Babin Yar, where the Ukrainians literally rounded up all of the Jews and openly shot them in the open after they forced them to dig their own trenches and graves. No one could blame them for doing this after what was done to them during the Holodomor, where the majority of them lost at least one relative. It was a national catastrophe. Nowadays, of course, everyone wonders, why are there so many neo-Nazis in Ukraine? And what's this whole neo-Nazi trip with the Ukraine? Well, that's where it comes from. To them, understandably, the Nazis are the good guys. So when it comes to the Ukraine and its history, what people don't understand, that puts it into some context. But it brings us back again to the question of disappearing populations. So when Jonathan Sachs wrote this book, An Eye for an Eye, he was pointing out that what happened to all these Germans that disappeared by the tens of millions. And he points out that when the Jewish commissars took over Eastern Europe, when the Eastern European satellite state nations were occupied behind the Iron Curtain, that basically all of the Germans were not only slaughtered by the many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands by the local population in reprisals where the local population turned on them and looted their holdings and basically slaughtered them where they could find them, but many of these Germans were put into the death camps that had all been located overwhelmingly outside of Germany, the majority of them in Poland, and these Jewish commissars exterminated the Germans. Now, Jonathan Sachs is the only person who, without access to the documents that I had at the Department of Defense, realized this, and just by sheer common sense, put the numbers together and wrote the book An Eye for an Eye.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so he, however, this is the problem, because no one would listen to Jonathan Sachs. The only people who would listen to him were Holocaust deniers. So basically, the last time that I saw Jonathan Sachs was at some Holocaust denial conference where Jonathan Sachs was presenting a presentation titled Stolen Holocaust. So in other words, what he was saying at that point was essentially that the Jewish Holocaust didn't happen, but the German Holocaust did. I think that's what he was saying, because I didn't really, quite honestly, I didn't really listen to it. But if he were at a Holocaust denial conference, he had to have been saying that, because they wouldn't have allowed him to speak there otherwise. It's kind of like when you're at a certain venue, you're going to be catering to that venue, or you're not going to be welcome. So, while that is not true, what he's saying at that conference, and understand, of course, I'm simply presuming what he's saying based on the logic of where he was at. But while it's not true, in a sense, it is true. In a sense, we have a stolen Holocaust, in the sense that the German Holocaust was far greater and far more egregious, but it's hidden, it's occulted, and the Jewish lobby has made an industry out of exploiting their experience.
See, this is why I very much would like to do an interview with you, because I think that, while your knowledge is extremely extensive, it's like there's so much to go into, really, and I do have a lot of questions I'd like to, present to you and see what you think, just off of your given knowledge, which is just extremely vast, Mr. Dietrich.
Thank you.
But I'll hop off here. Okay. I didn't mean to hold up or anything like that, but I'm really glad I was able to catch this live stream.
Yeah.
And I'm going to listen back on what you've said again. And
by the way, you're welcome to. You're welcome.
Yes,
I don't know if you have
fascinated.
this. Yeah, you're welcome also to take a splice. You can splice this off of tonight's upload, and you're welcome to put that on your channel if you wish.
Oh, I may try to do that. I don't know. I may try to do that, but because I'd like to get further into even what was happening with Operation Barbarossa, and what you might know about that,
Absolutely.
And with Stalin, and
I'd be
how
happy
he
to.
handled that was really weird.
Yes.
And then how that was ensued with the Cold War. After that happened, and then as it went, because at first they seemed to be amicable. Yes. It was very strange. They had many agreements. Hitler and Stalin did. Mussolini. So it was just very. You
realize I could go into that right now if you wish, but that would take another hour.
I know. But I'd really like to.
So do you want to schedule that interview now? Do you want to schedule that interview now? We can schedule it right now if you want.
When would you like to do it? I mean, any time is fine with me. I don't know what's a good time for you.
Okay, so let's go over to my calendar here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a screen share, and can you see this? The cursor moving around your initials?
Yes.
JH. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so my calendar here. Today's Michael Aquino's B-Day, his birthday.
Oh, wow. That's strange. How strange is that?
It's more than passingly strange.
That's very strange. I had no idea. That is bizarre.
Which is, of course, as a matter of fact, what I can do on that note is take you over to tonight's show, where I put this in the notes. So later on at your leisure, you can go to tonight's upload and you can take a look at the notes, where I mentioned the fact that he was born on October 16th, 1946. Coincident, the Stadt Nuremberg, the city of Nuremberg, executions. This was he was born the night of the Nuremberg hangings. And that is when what had happened was the man who had hung all of those individuals, and so let's take a look at this. Who hanged? This is John Clarence Woods. Now, John Clarence Woods is. Let's take a look at see if we can find a picture of this son of a bitch. It's funny because you'd think you'd find a picture of John Clarence Woods, but let me see if we can do this. John Clarence Woods, and let's take a look at see if we can find photo of him. Okay, so this is John Clarence Woods. This is where we're going to. Now, John Clarence Woods was in the United States Navy. And my legal father, the man who raised and guided me, George Joseph Henry Dietrich, was, of course, in the United States Navy. And my father reported this man because this man was going out and about town on leave, and he was raping children.
So he was
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So my father.
No.
I'm sorry. So my father reported him and got him dishonorably discharged. Now, by the way, I've explained in the past before that dishonorable discharge is extraordinarily rare because there are many other alternatives to it, and it takes a lot of work to get a man through a dishonorable discharge. They have to convene literally a group of commissioned officers, and they have to judge that the person needs to be dishonorably discharged. It's considered extraordinarily serious. And theoretically, it would be like branding a swastika on your forehead. Theoretically, you will be unemployable the rest of your life. This is all in theory. This man got a dishonorable discharge from the U.S. Navy, but and we're talking about just before World War II, that my father had reported him. He wound up somehow not only joining the U.S. Army, which is supposed to be completely impossible. Not only did he wind up joining the U.S. Army during World War II, but they promoted him to the highest rank a non-commissioned officer can have, the same rank that my father had. Said Chief Petty Officer in the Navy, this man was a Master Sergeant. In other words, a dishonorably discharged sailor was made into the highest rank in the U.S. Army for a non-commissioned officer, as if he had been in a career all his life of 30 years. And he was made the hangman for the top echelon of Nazis that they could capture.
Mr. Dietrich,
Yeah?
I have to log off because I have to.
Understood.
But
yeah. Okay. So we
I
go
do
into that
want to-
during the interview with that. We have to. If you
that
have
would
no
be
time to
amazing.
schedule it now, do you want to schedule it now? Before
yes,
you go.
let me know when you would like to do it. That'd be fine.
Okay. So let's see now with the amount of what I've got going on. So which is best for you, Tuesdays or Fridays, or what day is your show on?
Maybe on Tuesdays. A Tuesday
Okay.
would be fine.
Is your show live or is it?
Yes, we could do it. We'd be doing it live. We could do the either through the Skype or StreamYard.
Okay, and you only do it Tuesdays, or what days do you do it?
We could do it on a Tuesday. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Or that's fine. We could do it on a Friday or whenever is good for you.
I prefer Fridays myself.
Friday is fine.
So
Friday
if
is
we could do this on Friday, now you use camera. Would you like me to be live on camera?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. That'd be great. And I'll do the
Okay.
same.
Okay.
Fine.
So what we could do is make this for November, maybe. Let's try November. How about Friday the 3rd or Friday the 10th? How about Friday the 10th of November?
That sounds great.
Okay.
And nights are good for me. What
time?
Maybe what time in the evening is good for you?
Oh, what time
I'm
zone are
Central
you
Standard.
in? What time zone are you in?
I'm Central Standard Time.
Central, which is like 2 hours ahead of me, I believe. So
Yes, it's 2 a.m. right now.
okay, so if I were to, let's make this for, what's the latest that's the most convenient for you where we would still have time for a full interview?
What do you think about maybe
6 p.m. your time, maybe, which would be like 4 p.m. mine, or
I won't be
later?
available till probably 9:30.
Oh, excellent, excellent. All the better
Okay, so
for
maybe
me.
how about 10 p.m.
Your time.
Central Standard Time?
Yes, so that would mean about 8 p.m. my time. Okay, so
Okay.
I will put 8 p.m. 08 o'clock p.m. And I'll put interview by Jennifer.
Yes, that sounds great. And I'm just going to have a list of questions and some commentary and see what you think.
And we
'Cause
can make it for as long as you want. Yeah, 8 p.m.
Wonderful.
And what's your surname again? I'm sorry. Hawkins?
It's Arcane Observer.
Arcane
The
Observer.
Arcane Observer.
Okay, Jennifer at the Arcane Observer. At the Arcane Observer. Arcane Observer. Okay, Jennifer at the Arcane Observer. And of course, we can start off with, Aquino being born on the Nuremberg hangings. And,
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
about the hangman. That'd be a nice
All right.
place to start.
That
And,
sounds awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a
Mr.
blessed.
Dietrich. And You have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Yes, blessed morning, and we'll speak again soon enough. Of course, you're welcome to come on my show before then. So what
I'll listen, and if I think of anything, I'll call in and just visit and chat with you. That'd be great.
Yeah. Since you're on my list, what I usually do is as soon as I start around midnight Eastern Daylight Time, which would be about 11 p.m. your time, what I usually do is I just call everybody, and whoever wants to jump on, jumps on, or they don't bother to answer. Is that okay if I do that with you? You don't need to answer, but I can call you at that time.
Oh, that's fine. I'll message back if I'm doing something and can't, or
excellent.
Or if I'm late.
Okay, so I'll call you Wednesday night at about 11 p.m. during the hour of 11 p.m. between 11 and midnight, and then and then you can just handle it that way. All right, take care for now.
You too. Bye-bye. I'm going to be interviewing Douglas Dietrich. I'm extremely excited about it. I'm going to be promoting it here and there. We're going to be talking about everything from the world wars to Satanism in the military, the Temple of Set. I'm going to be interviewing him on November 10th at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Douglas Dietrich.